While my family was away, a cleaner discovered something incredible that changed everything. Sarah had always felt invisible, a ghost haunting the pristine halls of academia. A cleaner amongst scholars, she knew the weight of her mop far outweighed the weight of her dreams. She wiped down lab benches, her thoughts drifting into realms where complex equations danced before her eyes, mocking her humble existence. Now, alone in the research laboratory during the summer break, she fought the uneasy coiling in her stomach, aching for acknowledgement, for a moment to shine. As she organized the cluttered storage room, her hands brushing over forgotten papers and dusty equipment, her fingers snagged on a partially filled folder marked Renewable Energy Project, Proposal and Data. Curiosity pulsed through her veins, along with a sense of dread. Was this what she thought it was? A flicker of hope sparked, only to be weighed down by the fear of judgment. Who was she to meddle in a world so far removed from her own? But the thought of such a groundbreaking endeavor, left to languish in obscurity, gnawed at her conscience. Should she attempt to reveal its potential, or would that only provide fodder for ridicule? As doubt swirled, she felt the heavy influence of the academic elite pushing against her. The very professors she cleaned for, hailed as luminaries, would never take her seriously. Could she risk her déjà vu, living in the shadows, merely a janitor again? Yet, the yearning surged a wild, consuming ache, and she found herself texting Mr. Thompson, the professor whose door she often watched but never dared to knock on. "Can we talk?" The message trembled in her hands as her mind raced with possibility and anxiety. When he responded affirmatively, Sarah felt both elation and regret. Why was she leaning into this on the cusp of discovery? Could someone like her truly step into the bright lights of academia? Each second stretched as she anticipated their meeting, brought to reality by the coldness of spray bottles in her grasp. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into a whirlwind of brainstorming, experiments, and laughter, highlighting the steady unraveling of her sense of self. With every successful idea shared with Mr. Thompson, her confidence grew, but so did her trepidation. What if the chance of her lifetime unraveled before her eyes? Anxiety morphed into something she never expected, when an arrogant rival professor began to cast shadows over their work, mocking Sarah's contributions. She felt the familiar air of distrust swirl around her. Should she let someone dictate her worth? What if her name never graced the findings, eternally obscured by someone else's arrogance? Memories of her family's sacrifices flashed before her, their hard work fueling a fire of determination. Faced now with the threat of losing everything she had dared to build, Sarah felt pressure suffocating her resolve. Beneath the facade of a simple cleaner lay potential waiting to ignite, yet the fear of rejection loomed large. Even as she stood on the precipice of her dreams, heart heavy with consequences and clamoring doubts, she clutched the documents as if they were precious stones. Would she stand up for what was hers or retreat once more, asking herself if she belonged beneath the shining glow of triumph? The shadows lengthened in the lab, and with an ominous email awaiting her review, the walls seemed to close in. Could she truly reclaim her rightful place, or was she doomed to remain just a cleaner forever? The moment of truth arrived as Sarah stared at the screen displaying the email from the project's funding committee. The clock ticked in the background, each second pressing against her chest like a weight she was unprepared to bear. Was this the pivotal moment she had longed for, or merely another confirmation of her inadequacy? Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to open the email. Words flowed before her like a torrent, announcing that they had opted to pursue the project, but they required significant revisions and a polished presentation. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, an opportunity dangled just out of reach. But it also sparked a fire within her. She was not going to let this slip away. Behind her, the dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the lab windows, each one a testament to the years she'd spent in the shadows. She glanced at the proposal folder, its pages densely packed with their research. Their research. Her research. Focus, she murmured to herself, shaking off hesitations. She set to work, meticulously combing through the data with the same precision she applied to cleaning no detail too small, no mistake too insignificant. Ideas collided and harmonized in her mind as hours seeped away. She typed vigorously, crafting responses for the committee's requests, weaving in her thoughts, her theories, her voice blossoming slowly but surely. For the first time, Sarah felt a surge of power, one that surpassed her earlier uncertainties. But then, later that afternoon, Professor Campbell entered the lab. His presence loomed like a thundercloud, an unwelcome reminder of her insecurities. With a condescending glance, he scanned the clutter she had left sprawled across the tables. "What's this?" he scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain as he centered on the folder of their project. "Playing scientist, are we?" His comment struck her to the core. A string of words unraveled in her mind, a rebuttal that would assert her worth, assert her place. But instead of retaliating, she swallowed the words. What if he had a point? A moment of doubt flickered and danced on the edges of her perception. Was she playing, or was she truly becoming? "Actually, yes," she said, surprising both of them with her boldness. "I've been preparing for the funding committee's feedback." She took a step forward, her voice steady. "And I think you'll be impressed with what we've accomplished." Expecting laughter or scorn, she braced herself. Yet, instead of mockery, she found his gaze narrowed and calculating. Something in him seemed to shift. Had she unsettled him? That thought fueled her growing courage. Perhaps she wasn't just a cleaner. Perhaps she was becoming a force to be reckoned with in this academic arena. Encouraged, Sarah continued detailing her revisions and ideas. But as she spoke, she unwittingly set the stage for conflict. Would Campbell allow her to step into the light, or would he step on her ambitions like the insignificant dust beneath his shoes? Once he left, the weight of the interaction settled on her shoulders. Sarah returned to her laptop, her fingers racing across the keys. Her determination had transformed into a tangible force. But the question lingered: how far was she willing to go? The stakes had escalated, and with each click of her keyboard, she could feel the walls either closing in or opening up toward a new horizon. In that critical moment, she recognized a crucial truth. She would have to confront not just Campbell, but the entire notion of her identity. With newfound fire, Sarah set her resolve. The time had come to face her fears and her opponents. This was not just about the project anymore, this was about reclaiming her voice. As she hit send on the revised proposal and took a deep breath, anticipation coursed through her veins. The shadows were still there, but they no longer intimidated her. Would she step beyond them, or would they engulf her once more? With her fate dangling precariously in the balance, Sarah steeled herself. Tomorrow, she would confront Campbell and lay her claims. But would she find the courage to demand her rightful place, or would she retreat back into obscurity? As dawn broke, Sarah awoke with a tumult of emotions swirling within her: excitement, fear, resolve. Today was not just another day, it was the day she would no longer allow herself to be overshadowed. The glints of sunlight seeping through her window reflected the internal battle she faced. It was time to elevate her role from a mere participant to a central player in her narrative. Arriving at the lab, she immediately felt the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The clean, sterile air was alive with possibilities, and for a moment, she allowed herself to bask in it. Yet, it was also charged with the looming presence of Professor Campbell. She had prepared extensively for this confrontation, memorizing the key points from their proposal and anticipating every rebuttal he might throw at her. Placing her bag on the cluttered desk that had become her haven, she took a moment to breathe deeply, centering herself before she dove into the day's events. Her laptop felt heavier than usual, a vessel for not just her research, but for her aspirations in solidifying her place in academia. As the clock ticked closer to the hour of her meeting with Campbell, nervous energy coiled in her stomach. Would he brush off her contributions again? Would her confidence shatter beneath the weight of his condescension? These thoughts clawed at her motivation, but she pushed them away, reminding herself of the power she wielded: the power to speak her mind, to advocate for her work. When Campbell finally ambled into the lab, he wore his usual expression of self-importance. She could see the surprise flicker across his face as he noticed her resolve, an energy different from before radiating from her. "What's this? Feeling bold today?" he quipped, his voice draped in sarcasm. "Actually, I am," Sarah replied, her voice unwavering. "I want to discuss the revisions I've made and how my contributions can lead to our project's success." She laid out her points with precision, articulating her objectives and aligning them with the committee's feedback. Campbell's eyes narrowed, the calculating look of someone combing through weaknesses. But today, she wouldn't let him intimidate her. She wasn't playing, she was claiming her role. As she spoke, a strange confidence surged within her. It was more than just presenting data, it was a declaration of her identity as scientist in her own right. Each point she made resonated with conviction. The hesitations that had plagued her previously melted away in the face of her commitment and clarity. Yet, as she confidently articulated her thoughts, Campbell's condescension morphed into something else: displeasure. The corners of his lips pressed down into a thin line, a stark contrast to the earlier facade of control. He interjected, trying to slice through her presentation with dismissive comments, but each effort only fortified her resolve. "Respectfully, Professor, I believe you're underestimating the value of my insights. I've dedicated countless hours to refining this project," she pushed back, driven by a fire she hadn't fully acknowledged before. For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face, a crack in the armor he wore. The thrill of it sent a ripple of adrenaline through her veins. This interplay of challenge and defiance ignited something within her. In recognizing the shift, she realized she was ready to confront not only Campbell but the concept of self-doubt that had clouded her ambition for far too long. The meeting stretched onward, and as Campbell attempted to regain control of the conversation, Sarah fought for her narrative. No longer would she hide behind a stroke of chance or permission, she would forge her own path, even in the presence of those who might seek to undermine her. Then, just as the discussion reached a tense crescendo, Campbell's phone buzzed insistently, pulling him momentarily from their skirmish. In that pause, Sarah considered her next steps. Should she push on? Demand he acknowledge her contributions? The gravity of her choices hung in the air, the moment poised on the edge of transformation. As Campbell returned his focus, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of purpose buckle her shoulders. "I have more to share, and I believe you'll find it enlightening," she announced, ready to leap forward. But in doing so, she felt the tremor of doubt mix with her burgeoning confidence. The room crackled with anticipation, and in the back of her mind, she questioned, would this fuel her ascent, or would it mark the beginning of a confrontation that spiraled out of control? The tension hung, unbroken, as she prepared to unveil her most significant revelation, one that could shift the trajectory of their project entirely. As Sarah steadied herself, she felt the weight of her revelation looming on the edge of her tongue, an unseen force pushing her toward a critical juncture. The silence around her seemed to amplify the bass thrumming of her heartbeat, a reminder that she'd reached a pivotal point of no return. "Professor, during my recent analysis, I uncovered data that suggests an alternative methodology we could adopt," she ventured, each word deliberate. The flicker of skepticism in Campbell's eyes quickly transformed into one of curiosity as she continued. "If we implement this approach, I genuinely believe our outcomes will not only improve but might also redefine our project's trajectory." She could sense his gears turning, his mind grappling with the possibility that she might indeed present something valuable. The confidence she had mustered suddenly felt precarious, and she struggled to steel herself against the inevitable wave of skepticism. But then she recalled the preparations she had painstakingly engaged in, each scenario practicing how to respond to his potential doubts. Drawing from her notes, she began to expound on the alterations she proposed. Charts and projections glided across her laptop screen, illuminating the path ahead in a way that was both straightforward and compelling. "These data points indicate significant inefficiencies in our current strategy," she asserted, watching as Campbell leaned in, intrigued despite himself. "Your assertion is bold, Sarah," he said, the remnants of condescension in his tone fading slightly. "But these methodologies are not without risk. You may not fully understand the implications." His skepticism could have sent shards of doubt through her all over again, but instead, it stoked the fire brewing within her. I do understand the risks, Professor. But as scientists, isn't it our duty to weigh those risks against potential breakthroughs? This project is a crossroads, and retreating into safety could mean missing a monumental opportunity. The uncharacteristic fortitude she projected threw Campbell off kilter. She could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. She pushed herself to remain steady. Shielding her vulnerability behind the armor of her prepared data, she pressed on. By embracing this alternative, we don't just play it safe, we actively engage with the edge of our research. It gives us a chance to lead, to innovate. Each phrase felt increasingly potent, electrifying her resolve like a direct current. But even amidst her revelation, seeds of doubt still twined about her heart. What if she missed some crucial detail? What if he was right, and the risks outweighed the benefits? The thought ensnared her momentarily, but she dismissed it, reminding herself that moments of brilliance had often flickered in the face of calculated risks. I am not proposing we act recklessly, sir, Sarah said, leaning forward slightly, a move that dictated her seriousness. I urge you to consider the potential impact on the field and the visibility it could bring to our team. We will proceed with careful planning, ample testing, and hindsight. Campbell squared his shoulders, and for one fleeting moment, doubt crossed his expression, replaced quickly with a calculated stare. It seems you do possess the ability to argue your points effectively, he conceded, the alteration suggesting an unexpected respect. But, of course, convincing the committee will be the real challenge. The mention of the committee sent Sarah's heart racing yet again, this time with anticipation instead of fear. The thought of presenting in front of a wider audience was nerve-wracking, but she could feel herself becoming less the shadow and more the author of her own narrative. Let me present this to them, then, she proposed, emboldened. I'll need you as my ally to get this through, my voice alone may not be enough. As she finished, she could see Campbell pondering her request. There was an unspoken understanding brewing between them. Here was a shift in their dynamic, a possibility for collaboration rather than contention. But the tension was palpably vibrant, exciting while also threatening to unravel. Would he agree to champion her idea, or would her moment be snuffed out? You've piqued my interest, Sarah. We can meet with them, but I will be steering this discussion from here on out, Campbell finally replied. The ground beneath her feet shifted, and a new level of her reality emerged. She was closer to grabbing the mantle of her destiny than she had ever been, but the path was still fraught with uncertainty. Thank you, Professor, she responded, eager yet mindful of the fine line she now walked. With the meeting scheduled and the stakes raised, Sarah threw herself into preparations, her thoughts racing through potential outcomes and strategies. She would need to navigate Campbell's controlling tendencies while simultaneously asserting her presence. The room around her seemed to pulse with possibilities, and as she began mapping out her arguments for the committee, a realization struck hard. Stepping into this light would not merely require courage, it would demand careful navigation through the shadows of power dynamics. As she reflected on the journey ahead, she realized this was only the beginning. She could already feel the pull of anxiety intermingling with resolve as she approached the precipice of an even greater confrontation with not just Campbell, but with the committee that could determine her fate in the academic world. Would her ascent also require her to dismantle the structures that sought to hold her back? And how far was she willing to go to claim her space in a field that had often aimed to stifle her? The enormity of her challenge loomed, overshadowed by the question that began forming in her mind. Was she truly prepared to face the committee, or was she, ultimately, facing herself? Sarah meticulously reviewed her notes, the weight of her upcoming presentation pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. Daylight streamed through her window, but inside, her mind was cloaked in a fog of apprehension. There was a duality forming within her, the buoyancy of anticipation juxtaposed with the paralyzing fear of failure. The committee's judgment could reshape her career and validate or dismantle her emerging voice. What if they dismissed her ideas? The very thought made her stomach churn. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. They would be presenting real data, valuable insights, a labor of her passion and effort. Each chart she adjusted, each projection she revised, served as a reaffirmation of her capability. Yet, once she stood before the committee, the air would be thick with tension as the room filled with a mix of skepticism and scrutiny. Would she crumble under the pressure? You have to own your narrative, Sarah, she whispered to herself. Intonation messy with uncertainty, but it was a stark reminder no one would advocate for her voice better than she could. Every step taken over the last weeks blossomed into a realm of possibilities paving this path. Slowly, she began to visualize herself in front of the committee, articulating her vision, substantiated by data and reason. Sprouting alongside these visions was a dangerous thread of realization. She didn't just want to present, she wanted to lead. With that thought igniting a fire in her belly, she sat up straighter. But this would mean delicately maneuvering around Campbell as he instilled himself as the arbiter of the conversation. They were allies now, bound by a shared ambition that felt refreshing, yet she sensed it came with boundaries. Questions flared in her mind. How would she assert her views while not inadvertently overshadowing his? Reining in her anxieties, Sarah leaned into the challenge, channeling the energy into structured rehearsals, simulating the atmosphere of the meeting. Practicing her delivery, she envisioned Campbell shooting skeptical glances and the committee members furrowing their brows. Each play-acting moment turned into a mental exercise as she fine-tuned her arguments and responses. She had prepared for this moment and she intended to stand firm against condescension. The hours flew by, and when she finally halted her efforts, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. Each element of the project felt like brimming potential. However, beneath her pulse of adrenaline lay whispering doubts. Would her strategies hold water outside her bubble of research and practice? Would the committee grasp the ingenuity behind her proposals or remain shackled to archaic methods? Even as questions loomed, she realized this was more than just about that meeting. It was a crucible meant to forge her identity as a scientist. In that reflection, she discovered something profound: her identity had been waiting to coalesce into clarity. With vigor propelling her, she understood she had to emerge not just as a contributor but as an influential force. However, the harmonizing prospect of personal evolution was suddenly silenced by foreboding images of confrontation with Campbell. If he chose not to support her ideas deliberately, she would be thrust back into obscurity, dismissed in front of those who held the reins of her future. Monday morning arrived, bringing with it the weighty cargo of uncertainty interlaced with a glimmer of hope. Sarah stood before the mirror, repeating affirmations like mantras. She needed to center herself, ready to surmount whatever challenges lay ahead. "Today, you take control," she said, the words echoing within her, adding layers of conviction. As she made her way to the meeting room, she felt anxiety meld into a heady mix of excitement. Time slowed, every moment a pause between breaths and anticipatory stillness before a storm. With the committee awaiting, the moment of truth loomed closer, each step carrying the weight of her choices. Had she truly prepared, or was she an actor in a role she had yet to embody fully? But then, as she reached the door, a sudden certainty struck even harder than before. It wasn't only about her ideas. It was about commanding her space in the world of academia, redefining the narrative that had long held her subservient. With a deep breath, she pushed the door and stepped inside, ready to confront whatever awaited her and to claim the life she envisioned. The members were settling in, but Sarah felt the air pulse with collective anticipation. She had never been as ready to face this challenge, both for herself and for the very nature of her research. Yet, as Campbell strode in beside her, granting her the briefest of nods, she couldn't silence the creeping thought: would she have the courage to stand her ground, or would she fall under the shadow of shifting allegiances? The moment had arrived, and she was not just entering a room, she was stepping into her destiny. The room buzzed with an expectant energy, the muted shuffle of papers punctuating the heavy silence as Sarah's heart raced. She scanned the faces before her, noting the unyielding expressions of the committee members, each crouched behind their tablets, ready to dissect her every word. It was a moment suspended in time, a threshold she could cross either into affirmation or doubt, light or shadow. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, commanding attention with a clarity she didn't quite feel. "Thank you all for being here. Today, I am excited to present findings that could pivot our understanding of current practices." The words flowed out as she projected her voice, pushing against the tightening grip of anxiety. The first slide illuminated behind her, bright colors popping against the muted tones of the room. Data points surged like waves, and with each click, she explained the trends that surfaced within her research. The numbers held significance. They were evidence of her hard work. With every phrase, she sought to build a connection, to draw the committee in, dismantling any skepticism with logic and insight. Yet, her gaze flickered toward Campbell, gauging his reaction, hoping for a nod, a sign that he would support her. As she spoke, Sarah felt the creeping doubt clouding her resolve, threatening to suffocate the budding confidence that had blossomed in her rehearsals. Would Campbell reinforce her narrative, or was he already preparing to cast shadows over her claims? Pausing intentionally, she transitioned to a more intricate aspect of her research, readying herself for potential questions. I believe these insights not only validate our hypotheses but also pave the way for innovative applications moving forward. Silence draped the room as she made her pitch, her mind racing with the possibilities. A hand shot up, belonging to a committee member whose stern demeanor felt like a steel wall. How do you address the discrepancies noted in your data regarding implementation? The question lurked like a predator, but instead of retreating, Sarah felt a surge of resolve. Thank you for that question. Addressing discrepancies is crucial, she began, her voice firming as she referenced specific data patterns. In that moment, she was no longer merely a presenter, she was a defender of her research. This was the battleground for her emerging voice, and she had the weaponry ready. But amidst her assertiveness, the realization struck her that this wasn't solely about the committee's approval, it was about breaking away from the shadows she'd wrestled with throughout her career. As Campbell chimed in with a supportive commentary, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Yet, curiosity tugged at her. Was he simply aligning with her for the ease of the meeting, or had he recognized the potential she held? The meeting continued, and questions flew like arrows. Some were constructive, delving deeper into her methodologies, while others remained laced with skepticism. Each answered question fortified her stance, establishing her not just as a participant in the discussion, but as an authority in her field. Yet, one member's sharp comment insinuated she relied heavily on others' frameworks. Your proposals seem derivative, he remarked, cutting through the air like a knife. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, but she refused to back down. I appreciate your perspective. While I do build upon existing frameworks, my intention is to enhance them with contemporary relevance. Often, evolution in science comes from reinterpreting established ideas. Each word brimmed with resolution, a challenge reflecting her growth. As the presentation drew to a close, Sarah felt exhaustion creep in, shadows beneath her eyes hinting at the intense battle she'd fought within the committee's gaze. The applause felt distant, it was the acknowledgement of her own progress that resonated, a newfound determination enveloping her. Just as she prepared to step away from the podium, Campbell gestured for her to remain. I believe we should explore this direction further, he endorsed, a rare flicker of agreement lighting up the space between them. Euphoria rushed through her, but a fragment of intrigue pulled at her mind. Had she truly transformed her position, or was this just an illusion of acceptance spun from a larger game? As she departed the conference room, the reality of her experience weighed heavily. The committee would ultimately determine her path, but within her, a flame had ignited. Walking through the corridors, she realized she was on the brink of something pivotal, not just a project or a presentation, but a shift in her identity. But one nagging question lingered. What would it take for her to fully embrace her own power and challenge those who still underestimated her? The journey of self-acceptance had begun, but the stakes in her professional world loomed larger than ever. Would she continue to dismantle those boundaries, or was she about to confront deeper biases buried in the institutional fabric? The corridor stretched before Sarah like a lengthy tunnel, echoing her footsteps as she moved away from the interrogation of the committee. Each step brought with it a mix of triumph and trepidation. Did she truly believe in her own abilities, or was she simply latching onto the fleeting approval from Campbell? The vibrant decor lining the walls felt almost jarring now, as if mocking her inner turmoil. Ordering the cacophonous thoughts swirling in her mind was no easy feat, yet she clung desperately to the fragments of her recent success. Not wanting to confront feelings of self-doubt, she forced her focus toward her next steps, considering the implications of Campbell's support. Just how far would this newfound backing carry her? She pictured her project adapted and broadened, her research influencing significant change. But the exhilaration was tainted by an undercurrent of anxiety. What if it was merely a momentary spark? What if she failed to keep that flame alive? Strategic options flickered through her mind like miniature stars. Reaching out to Campbell could solidify her standing, but her instincts warned her it could also set her up for scrutiny should she falter. It became clear that if she wanted to ensure the success of her ideas, she would need to cement her position as a leading voice in the field. A decision loomed ahead of her like a stake in the ground. If she did not act with intent, shadows of doubt would overtake her once more. "Show them what you can do," she muttered under her breath, half for encouragement, half as a personal vow. The journey ahead was about more than just research findings. It involved her growth, her acceptance of what she could represent in a space that had historically dismissed her. Her mind darted to the upcoming professional conference, where she could showcase her work on a broader stage. The thought excited her, yet waves of anxiety surged through. Room after room filled with seasoned professionals, each potentially harboring their own doubts about her contributions. A life-affirming opportunity juxtaposed against a fear of rejection. With a determined exhale, Sarah resolved to push past the discomfort. This wasn't just another presentation. It was her statement, a claim to her rightful place in the conversation. Gathering her thoughts, she decided to prepare diligently. Each evening would be devoted to refining her presentation and integrating feedback from her last meeting. If she truly wanted to prove her worth, this was her chance to establish both authority and authenticity. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself knee-deep in her research, poring over articles, flipping through notes, and drawing connections she hadn't previously dared acknowledge. Each discovery was a building block, constructing a narrative that could strengthen not only her ideas but her identity. She was no longer merely a voice among many, she was carving out her own space. Yet, lingering in her subconscious was an unsettling feeling that faced her, the once constant presence of skepticism that had shadowed her past. The committee's accusations of her ideas being derivative echoed in her mind. There was a nagging temptation to play it safe, to lean on established concepts, but she resisted. To create a meaningful impact, she would need to build from the foundation but infuse her insights and personal experiences into the fabric of her work. Deciding to embrace risk, she outlined innovative approaches, integrating contemporary trends with her unique perspective. Nights turned into early mornings in a flurry of enthusiasm tinged with exhaustion. But, with each passing day, she felt her confidence swell, a palpable shift in her demeanor rippling like a ripple in water. Sarah began to stand straighter, smile wider, and speak more decisively. However, even as she prepared to unveil her evolution to the world, unforeseen complications began to surface. The optics of ambitious progress attracted attention, and the more she stepped into her own light, the more shadows appeared, casting doubt on her intentions and capabilities. With the conference just days away, she found a moment alone to gauge the gravity of this shift. A boundary was about to be crossed, she sensed it. Would she stand her ground, or would those lurking doubts consume her? To confront her own insecurities, Sarah realized she might need to seek out someone to confide in, someone who could help her navigate this treacherous landscape of ambition, fear, and identity. But who could offer the guidance she so desperately needed at this pivotal juncture? With anticipation brewing, she had a choice to make. Should she reach out to Campbell, risking vulnerability, or explore her own instincts first? Time pressed against her as she pondered the looming necessity of forging connections amidst a growing storm. What would she choose to do? In the quiet of her dimly lit apartment, Sarah sat hunched over her laptop, fingers hovering above the keyboard as the deadline for the conference presentation loomed ever closer. Each passing hour solidified a relentless pressure, amplifying her internal dialogue filled with swirling doubts. The faint glow of the screen illuminated shadows beneath her eyes, each flicker a reminder of sleepless nights consumed with research and self-reflection. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly, wrestling with the idea of reaching out to Campbell. Her insides churned as she pondered the risk involved in seeking mentorship from someone whose opinions held considerable weight in academic circles. Would he view her as capable, or merely as another ambitious junior researcher seeking validation? Beneath her resolve lay a nagging voice that echoed what the committee had once echoed. Was she merely an echo of others' thoughts? Placing her hands firmly on the desk, she focused, setting aside those internal battles for the moment. She needed clarity. A few taps on her keyboard and the image of her presentation outline appeared. The structure was there, but it felt hollow, a skeleton desperately needing flesh. It was moments like these that her motivation wavered. Standing before the committee had felt monumental, but like vapor, that confidence was dissipating as the reality of her situation set in. Sarah visualized the audience, perceptive, discerning, a jury poised with questions, ready to dissect her honesty and depth. She needed her ideas to resonate, to shake them awake, to challenge preconceived notions. But how could she convey that authenticity if doubt still lingered in her heart? The balance between presenting herself as an authority and remaining genuine felt precarious. A tantalizing thought pierced through this fog of uncertainty. What if she did reach out to Campbell? Seeking his guidance might not only provide her with insight but could also instill a sense of accountability. A mentor could fortify her confidence, anchoring her weighty aspirations to the practical means of navigating the unknown waters of her career. Confronting this urge was paramount. Was she prepared to embrace vulnerability? Finally, in a moment that felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying, she opened a new email. Drafted in raw honesty, she expressed her intention for guidance, sharing her excitement for the conference and the insecurities she's battled while preparing. The act of revealing her struggles felt like laying down heavy armor, leaving her in an exposed state. When she hit send, the overpowering tightness in her chest did not immediately wane. What if he didn't respond? What if he dismissed her questions? Despite the swell of anxiety, something shifted the moment she walked away from her laptop. The act of reaching out had marked a crucial step forward, not just toward the conference, but toward her own acceptance of needing support. Confidence had begun to take shape, no longer as fragile as she had feared. As days passed leading up to the event, Sarah poured herself into refining her slides, her creative juices fueling an increasingly immersive presentation. She began visualizing herself on the stage, connecting with the audience, feeling their engagement and sparking reactions. The more she envisioned this, the more palpable her resolve became. Doubt would not be a visitor she entertained. Yet, amidst this focus, a thread of unease lingered. She had heard rumors of a critic present at the conference, a renowned scholar known for dismantling presentations with precision. Facing that type of scrutiny was no small task. Even so, she ingested the fear and transformed it into motivation. Would she allow someone else's perception to dictate her worth? In a moment of inspiration, Sarah incorporated personal anecdotes into her presentation, weaving in her journey and the lessons learned. It was a risk, but one that echoed her belief in the power of lived experiences. The day before the conference, sitting in her living room amidst scattered notes and colored charts, she received a reply from Campbell. As anticipation coursed through her veins, she opened the email, only to find a supportive message filled with advice and encouragement. She read it twice, absorbing his insights, each line bolstering her foundational belief in her capabilities. With her heart racing, she took a deep breath. She had reached out for help and received it. Now a decision lay before her. She was ready to step onto that stage as an advocate for her work, but at what cost? Would she continue amplifying her voice, fully unleashing her narrative, or risk succumbing to the well-trodden path of conformity and fear? As she prepared for her presentation, the answers grew increasingly elusive, but her determination had never shone brighter. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. She would have to confront not just the conference itself but the very essence of her identity. What shape would it take when the spotlight finally fell upon her? As the morning sun sliced through the blinds, casting golden stripes across her living room, Sarah awakened with a jolt, the weight of impending responsibility settling heavily upon her. Her eyes instinctively flitted to the clock, the hands ticking steadily toward the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded. Today was the day, the culmination of her months of determination, research, and self-exploration. She shuffled to the kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee, each gurgle of the machine interspersed with the echo of her heart pounding. Glancing over at her presentation slides, she silently questioned her decision to integrate personal stories. The risk felt monumental. Would the audience perceive her authenticity, or would they critique her as unprofessional for injecting her experiences into a scholarly discussion? She found herself oscillating between confidence and trepidation, an emotional seesaw that mirrored the caffeine jolt coursing through her veins. The warm brew engulfed her with a comforting aroma, granting her a moment of clarity, enough for her to recall Campbell's encouragement. She had asked for guidance, and he had offered it freely, validating her intent to merge her personal journey with academic rigor. But deep inside, a voice whispered doubts. Was she merely seeking approval, or was this an authentic exploration of her identity in this field? The allure of vulnerability lured her back to her laptop. She opened her slides, reevaluating the anecdotes and ensuring each word resonated with sincerity. The idea of connecting her narrative to her research felt both empowering and frightening. How would they respond to the unmolded, unpolished facets of her experiences? But wasn't that the very essence of impactful storytelling? In that moment, determination surged within her. Deciding to step out for some fresh air, Sarah wrapped herself in a light jacket and made her way to a nearby park. The early spring breeze rippled through her hair, beckoning inspiration as she took slow, deliberate breaths. Every step felt like a metaphorical stride toward a new version of herself, one willing to embrace imperfection. As she walked, she couldn't shake the image of the critic she had heard whispers about. Renata Hughes, a name that struck fear into the hearts of many young scholars. The thought of her sharp gaze dissecting every flaw in Sarah's carefully woven narrative clawed at her resolve. But what if, rather than fearing scrutiny, she saw it as an opportunity to engage in a scholarly dialogue? Suddenly, inspiration struck. It was not about earning an endorsement from someone as polished as Renata, it was about presenting her authentic self, a blend of scholarly confidence layered with human experience. This epiphany reignited her passion, fueling a mental checklist of adjustments she wanted to implement. Returning home, Sarah felt invigorated. She dove headfirst into her slides, adjusting her delivery to embrace a conversational tone that felt true to her approach. She could intertwine facts with feelings, presenting not just data but a deeper understanding driven by lived experience. She conceptualized ways to engage the audience, encouraging them to reflect on her journey as they absorbed her research. The clock's incessant ticking drew her attention again, reminding her that time was slipping away. Sarah took one last look at her slides, satisfied with the direction they had taken. There was still doubt at the periphery of her thoughts, but it no longer felt like an anchor dragging her down. With a final breath to steady her nerves, she packed her materials and reviewed her mental roadmap for the day ahead. She would walk onto that stage not just as a participant but as a transformative voice, a scholar driven by both intellect and authenticity. But as she stepped out of her apartment, a chilling thought crept in. What if her newfound path, her willingness to present her true self, was met with harsh adversity? The stakes were never more evident than in that moment, illuminating the crossroads of her journey. Would she trust her voice to resonate through the sterile walls of academia, or would the allure of conformity allure her back into silence? As she approached the venue, a thrilling mix of apprehension and excitement bubbled up. She was on the brink of a pivotal transformation. What awaited her on that stage might redefine more than just this presentation but indeed the entirety of her professional aspirations. As Sarah stepped onto the conference stage, the spotlight bathed her in a warm glow. The audience, a sea of expectant faces, settled into attentive silence. This was the moment she had envisioned countless times, a culmination of hard work, courage, and profound personal growth. With her heart racing and her palms slightly sweaty, she opened her presentation with a powerful statement. Today, I stand before you not just as a researcher, but as a person whose journey through academia has been filled with obstacles many never see. The words flowed as she established not only the validity of her research but also the authenticity of her voice, a voice that had long been stifled by the weight of doubt and expectation. Each slide flickered on the screen, illustrating the profound implications of her findings on renewable energy. Yet, more than statistics and charts, she intertwined anecdotes that wove together her personal struggles with her academic ambitions. The response from the crowd was palpable, her sincerity resonated with them, and Sarah could see nods of understanding among the faces of established scholars. She was no longer the invisible cleaner in an academic labyrinth, she had transformed into a credible participant, commanding attention and respect. As she articulated the importance of innovative thinking over conventional methodologies, memories of facing Professor Campbell flashed through her mind, the uncertainty, the criticism, and ultimately, the determination to reclaim her narrative. She had taken risks that some might deem foolish, but she had harvested wisdom through every challenge. When questions arose, swirling from the audience, she felt buoyed by a newfound confidence. During one particularly probing inquiry from a committee member known for her skepticism, Sarah met the challenge head-on. "My research is responsive to existing frameworks, and it seeks to evolve them," she asserted, her tone steady. "Innovation lies in adaptation, and we must not shy away from exploring uncharted territories." With each question she answered, her voice grew stronger, the tremors of doubt dissipating. She could sense changes in the room. There was a newfound acknowledgement of her presence, an appreciation for the courage she demonstrated. Sarah finished her presentation with a sliding conclusion that merged her research insights with her personal philosophy. Embracing vulnerability is a pathway to breakthrough both in science and in life. By being brave enough to share our unique journeys, we open doors to innovation. As she stepped down from the stage, the applause resonated like a chorus of triumph, enveloping her in its affirmation. Eyeing Campbell amidst the crowd, he offered a rare, genuine smile, one that spoke volumes of respect and validation. The experience of presenting had not only solidified her place within the academic framework but had also anchored her personal identity. She had not merely filled a role, she had asserted herself as a voice of significance, a scientist threading her story into the fabric of her work. In the days following her triumphant presentation, congratulatory emails flooded in, responses from academic professionals acknowledging her impactful contributions. Sarah had secured invitations to collaborate on future projects that would allow her to elevate her influence in renewable energy research, confirming her transition from the shadows into the forefront of her desired field. This was more than professional validation, it was the culmination of her journey from invisibility to recognition. Sarah found herself finally believing in her potential and embracing both her academic and personal experiences with confidence. She was no longer merely the cleaner striving to dream. She had emerged as a respected researcher, a changemaker eager to continue pushing boundaries. As she stood in her lab, a sense of satisfaction coursed through her. This was not the end, it was merely the beginning of a legacy she was poised to build. She was ready to explore new horizons with the boldness of someone who had navigated the darkness and emerged robustly into the light of her aspirations. This is the moment when you take action. You need to subscribe now to the channel to stay updated on exclusive emotional stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and amplify voices like Sarah's. It makes a difference. Comment below your thoughts on Sarah's transformational journey and your reactions to the Ending Your Voice Matters. Share instantly this uplifting video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't let them miss out. Support the channel and become part of a community that celebrates personal growth and triumph. Don't wait even one more second. Take action now.